Hello, everybody. Unfortunately, the recording of our Ohigan service had some technical difficulties, so we're not able to present the service, but we thought we would at least present the Dharma message that I gave on March the 21st. I will start my talk with reading a wasan or poem from the collected works of Shinran. Please join me in Gassho. When a person awakens Shinjin and utters the name, Amida's light embraces and protects them, and in this life they acquire immeasurable virtues. This light, boundless and inconceivable, never ceases a moment, nor does it differentiate by time, place, or any circumstances. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. Thank you. So thanks for joining our Ohigan service. It's referred to as the Spring Equinox service. It's celebrated in the middle of March, right around this time of the year, and it's supposed to represent a time when there's a perfect balance in the world. The term Ohigan is a translation of O being the honorific and Higan meaning the other shore. It's meant to be a time when we reflect on our lives and contemplate reaching the other shore or the Pure Land. In Jodo Shinshu, we believe that we can get to the other shore due to the Amida's primal vow and his compassion. Another significant meaning of Ohigan is it's a time of balance, or my favorite word, serene equanimity. I'll say it again, serene equanimity. It's a transition time between winter and summer. The hours of the daylight and night are supposed to be equal. The temperatures aren't too hot and they're not too cold. During this time of balance, we're supposed to be able to contemplate the teachings of the Buddha. In talking about balance, it brings to mind that Buddhism, and particularly the Mahayana path, is considered the middle way. The historical Buddha Shakyamuni advocated that the middle path was a right path to follow. When he was expounding on the middle path, I think he was mostly referring to a middle path between a life of excess and a life of extreme sacrifice or ascetic practice. So as most of you know, Shakyamuni Buddha was born a prince. He had extreme wealth in his life, and he got everything that he wanted. But as he started his spiritual journey, he turned away from this life of excess and followed the opposite path, the path of extreme asceticism. He would deny himself any clothing. He would only wear the minimal amount of very light clothing or a robe. He wouldn't eat. He would deny himself food, deny himself shelter. So he often slept in the forests or in a cave. And he would deny himself any other comforts. So at that time in India, it was felt that this way of life of extreme sacrifice could lead to enlightenment. But when he meditated under the Bodhi tree, he found the middle path between these two extremes. This was the path to enlightenment. From then, he taught the Eightfold Path as a middle path that could lead to enlightenment. In the Mahayana schools, we have modified this to be the 6 paramitas or 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva Path. In Jodo Shinshu, we believe that due to our karmic nature, we're not able to obtain enlightenment on our own efforts, but it's only because of Amida Buddha's primal vow and his compassion that we're able to achieve a state of Buddhahood or enlightenment. The middle path, or trying to establish a balance in our lives, is essential for all Buddhists, but particularly for Jodo Shinshu followers. I think it's this desire to achieve a balance in our lives that has many people wanting to follow a moral spiritual path these days. when talking about a balance, it did bring to mind what's happened during the COVID pandemic. So one, if not the only positive that has come out of it for me, has been that it has restored a bit more of a balance in my life. And don't get me wrong, there's many, many negatives from this pandemic, from people who've suffered from the virus infection and gotten quite sick, to the number of people who've passed away. That has been extremely tragic. The fact that we're not able to be with our friends and families, we're not able to hug each other, the fact that we're always anxious and worried about getting the infection, we have to wear our masks and wash our hands constantly. So there's many negative things about this pandemic. But I do think that for some people, it has restored a little bit more of a balance in their lives. Giving myself as an example, just before the pandemic started, at the beginning of March of last year, we were going through an incredibly hectic period. So we were planning for our annual general meeting. We're supposed to be hosting the national AGM for the JSBTC. We were supposed to be hosting a national conference on human rights and Buddhism in Winnipeg. We were planning our Chaman supper for the spring, and we were planning our Hana Matsuri service. All of this in the course of 2.5 months. It was crazy. But with the start of the COVID pandemic, all of that went away in one fell swoop. So while the pandemic has been extremely negative and hard to deal with, it has brought a better sense of balance in my life. So when we talk about the importance of balance, I think that Jodo Shinshu and our path is one in which is particularly suited towards restoring balance in one's life. I'll explain this in a couple of minutes, but first let me tell you a story that illustrates the importance of balance in one's life. This is a story I just got from the internet. It's a story about a Mexican fisherman and an American businessman. So let me read it to you. So an American investment banker was on a pier relaxing on the shores in a small coastal village in Mexico. A small boat with just one fisherman docked next to him. And inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American complimented the fisherman on the quality of his fish and said, "Well, how long did it take you to catch them?" So the fisherman replied, "Only a little while." The American then said, "Well, why didn't you stay out longer? Why didn't you catch more fish?" And the Mexican said, "I have enough to support my family and our immediate needs." The American then said, "But what did you do? What are you going to do with the rest of your time?" So the fisherman said, "I sleep late. I fish a little bit. I play with my children. I take a siesta with my wife Maria. I stroll into the village each evening and I sip wine there with my amigos and play my guitar. I have a full and busy life." So the American scoffed. He said, "Well, I have a Harvard MBA, and can I ever help you? You should spend more time fishing, and with the proceeds from the extra fish you buy, you could buy a bigger boat. If you get a bigger boat, and if you fish longer and longer hours, maybe you can even buy several boats. Eventually, you could end up with a fleet of fishing boats with other fishermen fishing for you." "And then what?" asked the fisherman. "Well, then, instead of selling your catch to an intermediary, you could sell directly to the processor. Eventually, you could even open your own cannery. You could sell directly. You could control your products, your processing, and your distributions. You could own your own cannery." "And then what?" asked the fisherman. "Well, after you own your own cannery, then you probably would need to move from this little village to someplace like Mexico City or LA. You'd run your own expanding enterprise." The Mexican fisherman said, "Well, how long will that take?" The American said, "Oh, probably about 15 to 20 years you could do it." But then what? Asked the Mexican. So the American laughed and said, well, that's the best part of it. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO. You would sell your company stock to the public and become rich. You could make millions. Millions, said the fisherman, and then what? The American said, well, then you would retire. You'd move to a small coastal fishing village where you could sleep late, fish a little bit, play with your grandchildren, take siestas with your wife, stroll to the village in the evening where you could sip wine and play your guitar with your amigos. What a great story. This explains the problem with our busy lives and us trying to achieve more and more and do more and more, and the importance of balance. So how is it that Jodo Shinshu is a good spiritual practice that leads towards a better balance in our lives? We call the Pure Land path the easy path, and it's the path that is not needing strenuous practices. We don't have to worry about meditating for hours. We don't have to study the sutras to an nth degree. It's a path that entrusts the Buddha and the primal vow. We recite the Nembutsu with our sincere and entrusting heart. We are doing so with the understanding that as Bombu or imperfect beings, we can't achieve enlightenment on our own. Still, it is due to our oneness with Amida, or that ultimate reality, that brings us to enlightenment. In Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, self-reflection is also very important. We need to calmly look at our own lives and ourselves on a regular basis. And I think this helps promote a better balance in our lives. In many other sects of Buddhism, there are other techniques to bring one to a better balance. I think this is one of the reasons why mindfulness meditation is so popular these days. It does help you reflect on your life, reflect on what's going on, and brings you to a better balance. Nikon reflection is also a technique that can really help, where you think about things that have been given to you, what other people have done for you, what troubles you've caused others, and reflect on it with gratitude. I think people are trying to improve their awareness of their current state and trying to restore this balance in their lives. So as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, we can use these techniques like Nikon and mindfulness meditation to improve the balance in our lives. But still, an additional and perhaps more meaningful way is for self-reflection, to express our gratitude towards Amida Buddha for his compassion, and to recite the Nembutsu regularly. So thank you very much for listening to my Dharma message. I hope we see you during the Hanamatsuri service. Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandats, namandats, namandats. See you again.